Dick Van Dyke Show friends. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is KJ Ricardo, and today's video is a production spotlight on the casting of Anne Morgan Guilbert as Millie Helper on the Dick Van Dyke Show. So, Millie Helper is a very hilarious character on the show. She's very quirky, she loves to talk, and she's a really good friend to Laura. Sometimes she doesn't give the best advice, but you can't really imagine the show without her. It's an interesting story of how Anne Morgan Guilbert was cast on the show, so let's get into this information. The episode Jealousy introduced viewers to two characters who would round out the cast, Jerry and Millie Helper. The characters were inspired by friends of Carl Reiner and his wife Estelle, known as Jerry and Millie Schonenbaum. Just like on the show, they were the Reiners' neighbors in New Rochelle, New York. In fact, they started out as friends when they lived in the Bronx in the early 1950s. When the Reiners moved to New Rochelle, the Schonenbaums joined them, just like the Dick Van Dyke Show episode, My Home Sweet Home is Your Home Sweet Home. Anne Morgan Guilbert was really close friends with Jerry Paris. They had known each other for years, and they were actually neighbors. So they were already really close, and that's why their on-screen chemistry is so believable that they're married to each other. It's because they were really close friends. Jerry was Dick Van Dyke Show producer Sheldon Leonard's first and only choice to play Jerry Helper. After he was cast, Jerry recommended the role of Millie to Anne. He even talked to Anne's first husband, George Eckstein, about it, and he was a TV producer at the time. According to Anne, Jerry kept saying, "Oh, Annie, they need a funny person. You should be doing my wife." Finally, George said to Jerry, "Why don't you quit saying it and just get her an interview?" So Jerry arranged for an audition between Anne and Carl Reiner. This wasn't the first time that Carl Reiner had seen Anne perform. 2 years before the audition, he attended a performance of the Billy Barnes Revue, which was a musical comedy romp that played on Broadway and in Hollywood. Carl recognized Anne's comedic talent in that performance, and he was really pleased to see her show up for an audition. He said she was a sketch performer and funny, really funny. She had a way about her, a sound in her voice that made me laugh. Anne auditioned by reading a scene with Jerry, and that was it. Carl knew Jerry and Anne were perfect for Jerry and Millie. Anne was hired on the spot, and the rest is history. Anne really liked that Carl Reiner and the show's creative staff allowed the actors to offer their thoughts and suggestions about a script. She said everybody had input. Carl was really great about that. Anybody could think of a gag or change their line. Sometimes the new lines were funny, sometimes they weren't. But you always felt as though you were contributing. And that had to be really special and also rare. And so that was one of Anne's most favorite things about working on the Dick Van Dyke Show. During the first season of the Dick Van Dyke Show, Anne was pregnant with her second daughter, Haley Todd, who also became an actress. And Anne knew that she was pregnant the summer before they started filming the first season, and she was nervous to tell Carl Reiner about it. She thought that Carl Reiner wouldn't want Millie to look pregnant. Millie isn't supposed to be pregnant, and so Anne really thought that she was going to be replaced. But she didn't have to worry. Carl Reiner really liked her comedy, and so they decided to go along with it anyway and just not address her pregnancy. It wasn't written into the show, and so she just continued. She just wore maternity clothes, and Anne later said he apparently didn't mind having a big fat neighbor, and I think that's really funny. After filming the episode Where Did I Come From?, Anne took a temporary but very well-earned maternity leave. And when she left the show, she wasn't really sure if there was a show to come back to. It was the first season, and you never know if the show is going to get picked up for a second season. And so she really thought that when she left the show, she was saying goodbye forever. She said, "When I left, I didn't even know if the show was going to get picked up for another year. And when it did, I didn't know if they were going to use me again." She thought that she was going to be replaced. She had been away too long, But Carl Reiner had no doubt that he wanted to continue using Anne Morgan Guilbert as Millie Helper. He thought that her role on the show was irreplaceable. No one else could be Millie Helper but Anne Morgan Guilbert. And so to prove this to her, he offered her a long-term employment contract in October of 1962. And there was no question, there was no alternative offer. She actually rejected his offer, which had to be really surprising to him. Instead, she wanted to work episode by episode. She didn't want to be on contract with the show. She just wanted to work individual episodes. When they need her, she would show up to work. She said, with 2 youngsters at home, I didn't want to work all the time. I was happy doing about as much as I did. I thought, if I'm under contract, I'll just have to come in and sit around to do 2 or 3 lines. And for a 3-camera show, you've got to come in and work for 4 or 5 days, even if it's just a little bitty scene. So she was still really devoted to her home life with her children, and she would just show up when they needed her. So she worked episode by episode, not on a contract. She said, if they have to hire me as a guest star every time they use me, they'll only call me in when they really want to use me. And looking back, Anne Guilbert was convinced that she made the correct decision. She said, it worked out fine for me. I don't think the pay scale was that different whether you were a continuing character or a recurring character, like I was. And as far as she could really tell, her freelance status had little or no impact on the frequency of her appearances on the show. She said, they used me a lot because my character figured in the house scenes. Dick had Maury and Rosie to talk to in the office scenes, but Mary needed someone to talk to, and that's why Millie was always there. Millie was a crucial character to the show, and Anne Morgan was happy to show up whenever they needed her, but she wasn't needed for every episode, and so when she wasn't working, she was happy to be home with her children, and I really appreciate and admire that about her. Working on the Dick Van Dyke Show would eventually help benefit Anne Morgan Guilbert's personal life as well. In the episode A Farewell to Writing, there was a guest star named Guy Raymond. At first, Anne Morgan Guilbert didn't work with him that much while he was a guest star on the show. They didn't have scenes together, and so they didn't connect. But a few years later, they were both members of the same theater group. They reconnected, and they remembered that they had originally met each other a few years prior on the Dick Van Dyke Show. They remembered that, and so they became friends, which eventually turned into a relationship because they were both single at the same time. And so they had a romance, which eventually resulted in a marriage. And they got married in 1969. Anne said, we struck up a friendship, which turned into matrimony. They were married to each other until his death in 1997. And I think that's a really fun fact that Anne Morgan Guilbert met her second husband while working on the Dick Van Dyke Show. And that's it. That's all I have for you this week. I hope that you enjoyed learning more about Anne Morgan Guilbert and how she was cast on the show as Millie Helper. I really enjoy Millie. I think she's a fun character. Some people don't like her. They find her annoying, but I think that she's a good friend. She's very quirky. She adds humor to the show. I definitely would want a neighbor like Millie Helper. She would just provide some entertainment, and so that would just be really fun. And so I enjoy her character, and I think Anne Morgan Guilbert did a phenomenal job on the show. So I hope that you enjoyed and learned something new. Let me know what you learned, and I would be happy to read that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time with another video. And remember to always laugh often.